On a freezing winter morning, inside a crowded grocery store, an elderly woman wandered in hoping for nothing more than a simple can of soup to quiet her starving stomach, only to realize she was short by just 85 cents. At the very moment she shamefully reached to put everything back, a young black cashier quietly stepped in and paid the rest, leaving her overwhelmed with emotion. But neither of them had any idea that this tiny kindness would ignite a chain of events, because the very next morning, her billionaire son would show up at the young cashier's front door, and what happened after would shatter your heart. Before we continue, tell us what time it is and where you're watching from, subscribe and hype because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The first snow of December had come and gone in Brookfield, Illinois, leaving behind gray slush that pooled at street corners and sidewalks slick with ice. The sky hung low and heavy, the kind of pale winter morning that made everything feel colder than the thermometer said. Evan Carter pushed through the back door of Miller's Grocery at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes early for his shift. At 19 he moved with the careful efficiency of someone who'd learned not to waste time or motion. His jacket was too thin for the weather, but it was the warmest one he owned. The store smelled like floor cleaner and the faint sweetness of day-old donuts. Evan flipped on the lights in the back room and grabbed his apron from the hook. His fingers were stiff from the cold. "Morning, Evan." Gloria, the manager, appeared with a clipboard. She was 50-something, with reading glasses on a beaded chain. "Can you stock the soup aisle first? We got a delivery yesterday." "Yes, ma'am." He didn't mention that he'd already skipped breakfast. The $23 in his wallet needed to last until Friday, and today was only Tuesday. Evan had been working at Miller's since he turned 17. The pay wasn't much, $11.50 an hour, but Gloria let him pick up extra shifts, and she never asked questions about why a kid his age wasn't in college. He knew the answer, so did she. His father had made sure of that. Evan was restocking Campbell's chicken noodle when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He already knew who it was before he looked. "Dad, need 40 for electric." "They gonna shut it off?" Evan's jaw tightened. He'd given his father $60 4 days ago. He typed back with one hand while balancing a soup can in the other. "Evan, I gave you money Thursday, Dad. That went to other stuff. Come on, man. Don't make me beg." Evan shoved the phone back in his pocket and kept stocking. His hands moved automatically, turn the label forward, push the can back, next one. He'd done this so many times he didn't have to think about it. But he was thinking about the $40. He was thinking about the $73 in his checking account that was supposed to cover groceries, gas and the water bill. He was thinking about how his father used to be different. Daniel Carter had been a good mechanic once. One of the best in Brookfield, people said. He could listen to an engine for 30 seconds and tell you exactly what was wrong. He'd worked at Fisher's Auto for 15 years, came home every night with grease under his nails and stories about the cars he'd fixed. Then Evan's mom died. Cancer, fast and cruel. She was here in April, gone by July. Daniel didn't know how to be alone. He'd loved her the way some people love air, so completely he didn't realize it was keeping him alive until it was gone. He started drinking that first year. By the second year he'd lost his job. By the third, he'd stopped pretending he was going to quit. Evan had spent his senior year of high school learning to forge his father's signature on permission slips and covering for him when the landlord called. He'd applied to community college with a guidance counselor's help, but when the acceptance letter came, there was no money for tuition. So Evan worked, and his father drank, and the space between them filled with all the things they didn't say. That morning, before his shift, Evan had woken to the sound of his bedroom door creaking open. It was still dark outside. He'd opened his eyes to see his father's silhouette rifling through the jeans Evan had left on the chair. "Dad?" Daniel had frozen. Even in the dim light, Evan could see the tremor in his hands. "I just need a little," Daniel said. His voice was hoarse. 20, maybe 30, you took 60 last week." I know, I'm sorry." Daniel's shoulders sagged. "I'll pay you back. I got a lead on some work, down at—" "You're not getting any work." Evan sat up. He was so tired. "You're drunk right now." "I'm not, I can smell it from here." The silence that followed was heavy and sad. Daniel looked at his son, and Evan looked back, and for a moment they were both thinking the same thing. "How did we get here?" "Please, Daniel finally said. "I'll figure it out. I just need a little help right now." Evan had gotten out of bed, pulled 2 20s from his wallet, and handed them over without a word. Daniel had mumbled something that might have been "thank you" and left. That was 3 hours ago. Now Evan was stacking soup cans and trying not to think about whether $40 would even keep the lights on or if his father would spend it on something else entirely. By mid-morning, the store had filled with the usual weekday crowd, retirees buying single portions, young mothers with toddlers in shopping carts, a few contractors grabbing coffee and breakfast sandwiches. Evan worked the register during the rush. He was good at it, fast, accurate, polite. He knew half the customers by name. "Morning, Mrs. Kowalski." "Hi, Evan. How's your dad doing?" "He's all right. Thanks for asking." It was a lie but a kind one. Mrs. Kowalski smiled and paid for her bread and milk, and Evan handed her the receipt with the same small smile he gave everyone. When the rush died down, Gloria sent him on break. Evan sat in the back room with a cup of coffee he'd made himself and stared at his phone. The text from his father was still there. Evan thought about his mom. She used to make chicken noodle soup from scratch, the kind that took all afternoon. She'd hum while she cooked, old songs from the 70s, and the whole house would smell like garlic and thyme. His dad would come home and kiss her on the cheek and say, "Smells like heaven in here." Evan wondered if his father even remembered that. He deleted the text without answering and went back to work. 50 miles away, in a place where everything was clean and quiet and unbearably lonely, Helen Whitmore sat by the window of her room and watched the morning light struggle through gray clouds. Brookfield Meadows Senior Living wasn't a nursing home exactly. It was nicer than that. The brochures called it a luxury care community, and that wasn't wrong. The carpets were plush, the furniture was new, and every meal came on real plates with cloth napkins. There was a library, a game room, scheduled activities every afternoon. Helen hated it. She was 74 years old, she'd spent 40 years teaching high school literature, and before that she'd raised a son on a secretary's salary in a 2-bedroom apartment in Pilsen. She knew Shakespeare and Whitman by heart. She'd taught hundreds of kids to love books, to find themselves in stories. Now she sat in a room with pale yellow walls and watched strangers tell her when to eat. It had been 6 months since her son Lucas moved her here. He'd framed it as a gift. "You'll love it, Mom," he'd said, standing in her old apartment with his assistant hovering behind him, already tapping notes into a tablet. "They have everything. Activities, medical staff on site, a full kitchen. You won't have to worry about anything." What he meant was, "I won't have to worry about you." Helen understood. Lucas was busy. He ran a commercial real estate company worth, she didn't even know how much anymore. Hundreds of millions maybe. He had meetings in New York, conference calls with Tokyo, investors who wanted his time. He'd built an empire from nothing the way she'd always known he would. But somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten how to sit still. Helen looked at the photo on her nightstand. It was old, the colors faded. Lucas at 8 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a fish they'd caught at a state park. She'd taken that picture with a disposable camera. They'd been poor back then. Really poor. She'd worked 2 jobs to keep him fed and clothed. There were months she'd eaten peanut butter sandwiches for dinner so he could have hot meals. She'd sewn patches on his jeans and bought his school supplies at thrift stores. But they'd been happy. Lucas used to come home from school and sit at the kitchen table while she cooked. He'd tell her everything about his teachers, his friends, the science project he was working on. She'd listen and stir the pot and feel like the richest woman alive. When had they stopped talking like that? She remembered the last time he'd visited. 2 weeks ago, or was it 3? He'd sat in the chair across from her, checking his watch every few minutes. His phone had rung 4 times, he'd answered it twice. "I'm sorry, Mom," he'd said, standing to leave after only 20 minutes. "There's a crisis with the Denver project, I have to go." She'd smiled and told him it was fine. She'd watched him rush out, already on his phone before he reached the door. That night, Helen had cried into her pillow, quietly, so the nurse doing rounds wouldn't hear. Helen stood up slowly, her knees aching in the cold. She walked to the closet and pulled out her coat, an old wool one she'd had for 20 years, long before Lucas could afford to buy her cashmere. It was Tuesday afternoon. The staff changed shifts at 2:30. If she timed it right, she could slip out the side door near the kitchen while everyone was distracted. She wasn't running away, exactly. She just needed air. Space. A chance to be Helen again, instead of Mrs. Whitmore in room 14. She tucked her wallet into her coat pocket. Inside were 2 $5 bills and a handful of change, the cash she'd been saving from the small monthly allowance Lucas had arranged for her. She never spent it. What was there to buy? Helen waited by the door, listening. At 2:33, she heard voices in the hallway. Carla and Denise, the afternoon nurses, chatting about someone's birthday. Helen opened her door a crack, checked both ways and slipped out. The side exit was propped open with a wedge, probably by someone sneaking a cigarette break. Helen pushed through and stepped into the cold. The air hit her like a slap, but she welcomed it. She pulled her coat tighter and started walking. For the first time in 6 months she felt alive. She didn't have a plan. She just walked, block after block, past strip malls and gas stations and houses with Christmas lights already up. Her feet hurt, she was wearing the wrong shoes, thin-soled flats that did nothing against the cold pavement, but she kept going. After 40 minutes her legs were shaking. She reached a bus stop and sank onto the bench, breathing hard. A blue and white CTA bus pulled up. The door hissed open. "You getting on?" the driver called. Helen hesitated, then nodded. She climbed the steps slowly, gripping the rail. "Where to?" the driver asked. Helen blinked. She hadn't thought about it. "Downtown Brookfield, 250. She opened her wallet and counted out the fare in quarters and dimes, her arthritic fingers fumbling with the coins. The driver waited patiently, and Helen felt her face flush with embarrassment at how long it took. Finally, she dropped the exact change into the slot and found a seat near the back. The bus was nearly empty, a teenage boy with headphones, an older man reading a newspaper, a young woman staring at her phone. Nobody looked at her. Helen pressed her forehead against the cold window and watched the suburbs roll past. She felt invisible. She felt free. The bus dropped her at the corner of Burlington and Maple, right in the center of Old Brookfield. It was a charming little downtown brick storefronts, a historic theater, a coffee shop with twinkle lights in the window. Helen walked slowly, taking it all in. She hadn't been here in years. There used to be a bookstore on this block, the kind with creaky floors and a cat that slept in the window. It was gone now, replaced by a yoga studio. Everything changed. Everyone moved on. Her stomach rumbled. She hadn't eaten since the bland oatmeal they'd served at breakfast, 6 hours ago. Helen spotted a small grocery store across the street, Miller's Grocery, the sign said in faded red letters. It looked old-fashioned, the kind of place that had been there forever. She crossed the street carefully, her feet aching with every step, and pushed through the door. The warmth inside was immediate and welcome. Helen stood for a moment, letting the heat seep into her bones, feeling the sting of cold leave her cheeks. The store smelled like coffee and something baking. It wasn't big, just a few aisles, a deli counter in the back, a register up front. An older woman with glasses was restocking chips. A young man stood at the register, ringing up a customer. Helen picked up a handbasket and started walking the aisles slowly, her shoes squeaking softly on the linoleum. She hadn't been grocery shopping in 6 months. At Brookfield Meadows, all the meals were provided, served at specific times on identical plates. She'd forgotten what it felt like to choose her own food, to walk these aisles and make decisions for herself. She picked up a loaf of bread, the cheapest one, white bread in a plastic bag, 99 cents, then a small carton of milk, $2.49, a can of Campbell's chicken noodle soup. The soup made her pause. She held it in her hands, feeling the weight of it, reading the label even though she knew every word by heart. She remembered making soup for Lucas when he was small and had a cold. She'd open the can, add a little extra water to stretch it, serve it with saltines. He'd eat it in his pajamas on the couch, wrapped in the blanket his grandmother had crocheted, and she'd sit beside him reading Where the Wild Things Are until he fell asleep. Helen's eyes stung. She blinked quickly and put the can in her basket. She added a small bunch of bananas, 3 of them, slightly green, and headed to the register. The young man working there had dark hair that fell across his forehead and tired eyes that looked older than his face. He glanced up as she approached and gave her a small polite smile. "Hi," he said quietly. "How are you today?" "I'm well, thank you." Helen's voice came out shakier than she'd expected. She cleared her throat. He began scanning her items. Beep, beep. Each sound felt too loud in the quiet store. The total appeared on the small screen, $7.43. Helen opened her wallet with fingers that trembled slightly, from the cold, from exhaustion, from something deeper she couldn't name. She pulled out her two $5 bills and laid them carefully on the counter. $3 would go back into her wallet. It felt like a victory, having change left over. But then she remembered, the bus fare home would be another $2.50, that left her with only 50 cents. Helen's chest tightened. She looked down at her groceries, already bagged. She looked at the money on the counter. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Could you?" She had to stop and swallow. "Could you take off the soup?" The words felt like surrender. The young man's hand stilled on the register. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Behind Helen, someone sighed loudly. A man's voice, impatient. "Come on, lady." Helen's hands began to shake harder. "I'm so sorry," she said again, this time turning slightly toward the man behind her. "I just need a moment." "It's okay," the young man at the register said. His voice was quiet but firm. "You don't have to take anything off." Helen turned back to him, confused. "But I don't have." He was already reaching into his pocket, pulling out his wallet. He took out a dollar bill, wrinkled and soft, like it had been carried for a while, and added it to her pile of money on the counter. "There," he said simply. "Now you're all set." Helen stared at the dollar bill. Then at him. "No, I can't, you don't have to. It's okay." He was already putting her soup back in the bag, his movements gentle, deliberate. "Really, it's just $1. But they both knew it wasn't just $1. Helen's eyes filled with tears. Her throat closed up. She tried to speak, but no words would come. This boy, this stranger, had seen her shame and met it with kindness instead of judgment. He handed her the bag across the counter. Their eyes met for just a moment, and in his tired gaze, Helen saw something that looked like understanding, like he knew what it meant to count pennies. Like he knew what it meant to be $1 short of okay. "Thank you," Helen finally managed to whisper, her voice breaking. The young man nodded, a small sad smile on his face. "You're welcome, ma'am, you have a good day." Helen clutched the bag to her chest and walked toward the door on unsteady legs. Behind her, she heard the man in line step up to the register. She pushed through the door into the cold afternoon air, and stood on the sidewalk, breathing hard, tears streaming down her face. When was the last time someone had been kind to her without wanting something in return? When was the last time someone had seen her as more than an inconvenience? Helen wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and started walking. Inside Miller's grocery, something remarkable was beginning to happen. The man in the bear's jacket, the one who'd sighed impatiently, stepped up to the register. Evan scanned his items, a 6-pack of Old Style, a bag of chips, a frozen pizza. $14.62, Evan said. The man pulled out his wallet, then paused. He glanced toward the door, where the old woman had just left. He thought about the way her hands had shaken. He thought about the shame in her voice when she'd asked to put the soup back. He thought about his own mother, who lived alone in Berwyn and was too proud to ask for help, even though he knew she struggled. The man cleared his throat. "Hey kid." Evan looked up. "Yes sir. Ring up the next person too, I'll cover them." Evan blinked. "What?" "The person behind me." The man gestured with his thumb. "Add their stuff to mine. I'll pay for it." The woman behind him, mid-30s, wearing hospital scrubs with cartoon characters on them, clearly exhausted from a long shift, looked up in surprise. "Are you serious?" "Yeah." The man shrugged, but he was smiling now, something softening in his face. "Why not? That lady, she just needed 85 cents and it about broke her. Made me think. When's the last time I did something good for a stranger?" The woman in scrubs pressed a hand to her mouth. Her eyes were suddenly wet. "Thank you, that's really kind." Don't thank me, the man said, pulling out his credit card. Thank the kid here. He started it. Evan rang up both orders, his hands moving automatically while his mind spun. The man paid $37.18 total and left with a wave. The woman in scrubs stepped up to the counter. She'd been buying a sad-looking salad and a Red Bull, the dinner of someone working a double shift. She stood there for a moment, looking at Evan. Then she turned to the elderly man behind her. Mr. Patterson, a regular who came in every Tuesday for bread and butter. I'll get yours too, she said. Mr. Patterson's eyebrows shot up. You sure about that, young lady? I'm sure. She smiled, and it transformed her tired face. Someone just did something nice for me. I want to pass it on. And just like that, it spread. Mr. Patterson paid for the teenager behind him. A girl with purple streaks in her hair and headphones around her neck. The teenager stared at her phone for a moment, then looked up at the college student behind her. You know what? Yeah. I'll get the next person too. The college student paid for the single mother, with 2 small children clinging to her legs. The single mother, tears in her eyes, paid for the construction worker behind her. The construction worker laughed in disbelief and paid for the elderly couple after him. Within 20 minutes, the line at Miller's grocery had transformed into something neither Evan nor Gloria had ever witnessed. People weren't just paying for their own groceries, they were paying for strangers. The energy in the store shifted, became electric with possibility and joy. Someone started clapping, then someone else. Soon the whole store was filled with applause and laughter, and the kind of chaotic, beautiful goodness that only happens when people remember they're capable of kindness. Gloria stood at the second register, tears streaming down her face. I've been working here 32 years, she said to anyone who would listen. 32 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Near the back of the store, by the refrigerated section, a woman named Sandra Chen watched the scene unfold with her phone in her hand. She'd stopped in to grab milk on her way home from work, just a quick errand before picking up her daughter from daycare. But this was something else. She opened her camera app and hit record. The video she captured was shaky and unpolished, shot from between the aisles. It showed the line of people passing groceries forward, the smiling faces, the spontaneous applause. It showed Gloria crying and laughing at the same time. It showed Evan at the register, looking stunned and overwhelmed, and quietly moved, his hands still processing transactions while his eyes were bright with unshed tears. Sandra stopped recording after 90 seconds and immediately opened Facebook. Her fingers flew across the screen. Something beautiful just happened at Miller's grocery in Brookfield. A young cashier paid for an elderly woman who was 85 cents short, and then everyone in line started paying for each other. I've never seen anything like it. Faith in humanity, restored. She posted it without a second thought, and went to grab her milk. By the time she checked out and walked to her car, the video had 37 views. By the time she picked up her daughter, it had been shared 12 times. By the time she got home and started making dinner, it had been shared 209 times. The video was going viral. Evan's shift ended at 4 o'clock. By then the store had settled back into its normal rhythm, but the energy still lingered like perfume in the air. Gloria pulled him aside before he left, her hands on his shoulders. That was something special, Evan. What you did for that woman, you started something beautiful today. Evan shook his head, uncomfortable with the praise. It was just $1, Gloria. It was more than that, and you know it. She squeezed his shoulders. You've got a good heart, kid. Your mama would be proud. The words hit Evan square in the chest. He had to look away, blinking hard. Thanks, he managed. Gloria patted his cheek gently. Go on home, get some rest. Evan walked out into the cold December afternoon, and started the 2-mile walk home. He could have taken the bus, but he needed the time to think, needed the cold air to clear his head. The old woman's face kept appearing in his mind. The way her hands had trembled as she counted out her change. The way she'd apologized, her voice so small and broken, like she was ashamed of being 85 cents short of survival. It reminded him viscerally of his mom. Not in appearance, his mom had been younger,
blonde, always moving fast because there was never enough time in the day. But something about the woman's quiet dignity, her gentle sadness, the way she tried so hard not to be a burden, that was exactly like his mother in those final months. His mom had tried so hard to hide how sick she was. She'd worn scarves when her hair fell out from chemo. She'd smiled through the pain. She'd kept cooking dinner, even when she could barely stand, because she wanted things to feel normal for him and his dad. She'd never wanted to be a burden. Evan wondered if the old woman was alone, if she had family who visited, if anyone was making sure she was okay. He wondered if he'd ever see her again. The thought made him sad in a way he couldn't quite explain. By the time Evan reached his street, the winter sun was already setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gray. He turned onto Oakwood Avenue, his feet aching, his stomach growling, and then he saw her. The old woman from the store. She was sitting on a bench at the bus stop 2 blocks from his house, the grocery bag at her feet. Her coat was pulled tight around her thin frame, but she was shivering visibly. In her hands was the can of soup, the one he'd helped her buy, and she was staring at it like it held all the answers to questions she couldn't ask. Evan stopped walking. He watched as she opened the can. She had one of those little manual can openers on her keychain, and used the pop-top lid as a makeshift spoon. She lifted the can to her lips and drank the cold soup directly from it. The sight hit Evan like a fist to the gut. She was eating cold soup from a can. Outside, in 30-degree weather, at a bus stop, because she had nowhere else to go. Evan's feet moved before his brain caught up. He walked toward her, his heart pounding. "Ma'am." Helen looked up, startled. When she saw him, recognition flickered across her face, followed immediately by embarrassment. She quickly lowered the soup can, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "Oh," she said, her voice shaky, "it's you. From the store. Are you okay?" Evan asked. It was a stupid question. She clearly wasn't okay. "I'm fine, thank you." Helen straightened her back, trying for dignity even as she shivered. "Just waiting for the bus." Evan looked at the bus schedule posted on the shelter. The next bus wasn't for 47 minutes.
He looked back at her, really looked at her. Her lips had a blue tinge, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the soup can. Her cheeks were hollow, her eyes sunken with exhaustion. "How long have you been out here?" he asked gently. Helen hesitated. "I'm not sure, a while." "Have you eaten anything besides that?" "This is plenty," Helen said quickly. "It's very good soup." It was a lie. Evan could see it in her eyes. He made a decision. "Please," he said, crouching down so he was at her eye level. "Please come with me. My house is just 2 blocks away. You can warm up, have a proper meal. Then I'll help you figure out where you need to go." "Oh, I couldn't possibly. You're freezing," Evan said quietly. "And you're eating cold soup at a bus stop. Please just let me help you." Helen looked at him for a long moment. In his young face she saw genuine concern. No judgment, no pity, just simple human kindness. Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," Evan said firmly. He stood and extended his hand. "Come on, please." Helen stared at his outstretched hand. She thought about saying no. She thought about the pride she'd carried all her life, the determination never to ask for help, never to impose, but she was so cold, so tired, so hungry. And this boy, this stranger, was offering her warmth without asking for anything in return. Slowly she reached out and took his hand. Evan helped her to her feet. She swayed slightly and he steadied her with a gentle grip on her elbow. "Thank you," Helen whispered. "Don't thank me yet," Evan said with a small smile. "I'm not a very good cook." They walked the 2 blocks slowly, Helen leaning slightly on Evan's arm. She tried not to put too much weight on him, tried to maintain some shred of independence, but her legs were shaking and her feet burned with cold. Evan matched her pace without complaint, his hand steady under her elbow. When they reached 3247 Oakwood Avenue, Helen stopped and looked at the house. It was small and shabby, peeling paint on the siding, a sagging gutter, weeds pushing through cracks in the concrete walkway. One of the front windows was covered with cardboard and duct tape, but there was a small porch with a railing, and someone had planted mums in a pot by the door, though they'd long since died in the cold. "It's not much," Evan said, following her gaze, "but it's warm." Usually, He said that last word with a strange emphasis that Helen didn't understand. Not yet. Evan unlocked the door and pushed it open. After you. Helen stepped inside, and immediately her heart sank. It was dark. Completely dark. Oh, Evan said behind her, his voice flat. Right. He closed the door and disappeared for a moment. Helen heard him moving through the house, heard drawers opening and closing. Then a soft glow appeared. He was holding a camping lantern, the LED kind that cast long shadows. Sorry, Evan said, not meeting her eyes. The power's out. It happens sometimes. But Helen was 74 years old, and she'd raised a child in poverty. She knew the difference between the power's out and the power's been shut off. She didn't say anything. She just stood in the entryway, clutching her grocery bag, and felt her heart break a little for this boy. Here, Evan said, setting the lantern on the kitchen counter. Sit down, please. The kitchen was small and sparse. A table with two mismatched chairs, a refrigerator that hummed loudly, cabinets with chipped paint. On the counter Helen noticed a bright orange paper, a disconnection notice from Comd. She looked away quickly, not wanting to embarrass him. Evan busied himself at the stove. I don't have much, but I can make some ramen. And I have eggs. Do you like eggs? That sounds wonderful, Helen said softly. She sat at the table and watched him work. He moved with quiet efficiency, filling a pot with water from the tap, setting it on the gas stove, turning the knob until the flame caught with a soft whoosh. The stove worked because it was gas. But everything else, the lights, the heat, the refrigerator was silent. Helen's hands tightened on her grocery bag. While the water heated, Evan pulled ingredients from the cabinets, 2 packets of ramen, chicken flavor, a bag of frozen mixed vegetables from the freezer, 2 eggs. He cracked the eggs into the boiling water with practiced ease, added the noodles and vegetables, stirred gently. The smell filled the small kitchen, warm and savory. Helen's stomach growled audibly. She pressed a hand to it, embarrassed. It'll be ready in a minute, Evan said without turning around. When the ramen was done, he divided it between 2 bowls, giving her the larger portion, though Helen noticed. He set the bowl in front of her with a spoon and a napkin. It's not fancy, he said, sitting down across from her with his own bowl. Helen looked down at the ramen, cheap noodles in broth, a few vegetables, a perfectly poached egg floating on top. It was the simplest meal imaginable, but it was hot, and he'd made it for her. And he'd given her the bigger portion, even though she could see how thin he was, could see the way his shirt hung loose on his frame. Her eyes filled with tears. Thank you, she whispered. This is perfect. They ate in silence for a while, the only sounds their spoons against the bowls and the soft hiss of the lantern. The food was hot and filling, and Helen felt warmth spreading through her body for the first time all day. After a few minutes, Evan spoke. I'm Evan, by the way. Evan Carter. Helen Whitmore, she said. It's nice to meet you properly, Evan. You too, Mrs. Whitmore. Another silence. Then Helen said, you didn't have to do this. Bring me here, feed me. You've already been so kind. Evan shook his head. It's just ramen. It's more than that. Helen set down her spoon and looked at him directly. You saw me at that bus stop. You saw me eating cold soup, and instead of walking past like everyone else would have, you stopped. You cared. Her voice trembled. Do you know how rare that is? Evan looked uncomfortable. Anyone would have done the same. No, Helen said firmly, they wouldn't. Most people would have pretended not to see. But you saw me. At the store and again at the bus stop. You saw me. Evan's throat worked. He looked away. After they finished eating, Helen insisted on helping clean up, even though Evan protested. She washed the bowls in cold water at the sink, while Evan dried them with a threadbare dish towel. I used to teach high school, Helen said as she scrubbed. English literature, 38 years, that's a long time. It was a good life. She smiled, but there was deep sadness in it. I loved those kids, even the difficult ones. Especially the difficult ones. They were the ones who needed someone to believe in them most. Evan dried a bowl slowly. Why'd you stop? Helen's hand stilled in the water. I got old, and my son thought I needed to be somewhere safe, somewhere I'd be taken care of. She swallowed hard. So he put me in a senior living facility. A very nice one, very expensive, but you don't want to be there, Evan said quietly. No. The word came out as barely a whisper. Everything there is so controlled. Someone decides when I eat, what I eat. I can't cook anymore. They say it's a safety hazard. I can't go for walks without someone asking where I'm going. I have to attend activities at scheduled times like a child." She wiped her eyes with her wet hand. "I know my son means well. I know he's busy, but I feel like I'm just waiting there, waiting to die." Evan's chest felt tight. "Is that why you left?" Helen nodded. "I just wanted one day to feel like myself again. To make my own choices. To eat food I picked out myself." She laughed bitterly. "And I couldn't even afford that. I was 85 cents short." "Hey," Evan said gently. "You don't have to. I used to be someone," Helen continued, as if she hadn't heard him. "I had students who remembered me years later. I had a life that mattered, and now I'm just no one. An old woman who can't even buy her own groceries." "That's not true," Evan said, his voice fierce. "You're not no one." Helen turned to look at him, tears streaming down her face. "You taught for 38 years, Evan said. You raised a son who's successful enough to afford that fancy place. You survived whatever you survived to get here. That's not nothing. That's not no one." Helen pressed her hands to her mouth, sobbing quietly. Evan set down the dish towel, and awkwardly put his arms around her. She was so small, so fragile, she felt like she might break if he held her too tight. Helen cried into his shoulder while he stood there. This boy who was barely more than a stranger, and let her fall apart. When her tears finally subsided, they moved to the living room. Evan lit a few candles, the long emergency kind in glass jars, and they sat on the old couch, wrapped in blankets against the cold. "Tell me about your son," Evan said. Helen smiled, despite her tears. "Lucas, he's 46 now, runs a commercial real estate company. Very successful. He worked so hard to get where he is." She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "We didn't have much when he was growing up. His father left when Lucas was 3. I worked 2 jobs, secretary during the day, waitress at night. We lived in a tiny apartment in Pilsen. But I made sure he had what he needed. Books, school supplies. I saved every penny I could for his education." "Sounds like you did a good job," Evan said. "I tried." Helen's smile faded, but somewhere along the way, he got so focused on success, on making money, on being busy, he forgot how to just be present. "He visits me every few weeks, but he's always on his phone, always rushing off to the next meeting. He looks at me, but I don't think he sees me anymore." Evan thought about that. About being looked at but not seen. "What about you?" Helen asked. "Tell me about your family." Evan hesitated. He didn't like talking about this, but Helen had shared her pain with him. It felt wrong not to do the same. "It's just me and my dad," he said finally. "My mom died 3 years ago. Cancer." "Oh, Evan." Helen's hand found his. "I'm so sorry. After she died, my dad kind of fell apart. He was a mechanic, a good one, but he started drinking. Lost his job. We fell behind on bills. I dropped out of community college to work full time." He stared at the candle flame. "I keep trying to help him, but he takes the money and spends it on alcohol, or on debts I don't even know about. And I'm so tired of it, but I don't know how to stop." "Where is he now?" Helen asked gently. "I don't know. He left yesterday after." Evan stopped. "After he took money from me again." Helen squeezed his hand. "You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, Evan. Believe me, I've tried with students, with friends, even tried with my own son in different ways. You can't fix people. But he's my dad. I know." Helen's voice was infinitely kind. "But you have to take care of yourself too. You're only 19, you should be living your life, going to school, thinking about your future. Not holding up someone else who refuses to stand on their own." Evan's vision blurred with tears. "I don't know how to let go." "I know," Helen whispered. "But carrying someone else's weight won't make you stronger. It'll just break you too." They sat like that for a long time, 2 lonely people in a cold, dark house, holding each other's hands because there was no one else to hold on to. Eventually Helen spoke again. "I should go. It's late." Evan looked at her. "Go where?" Helen's face crumpled slightly. "I suppose I should try to get back to Brookfield Meadows." "Do you want to go back?" "No," Helen admitted, "but I don't have anywhere else." Evan made a decision. "Stay here tonight, please. You can have my bed. I'll sleep on the couch." "Evan, I couldn't possibly. It's not safe for you to be out there this late," Evan said. And honestly,
He gave her a small sad smile. I could use the company. Helen looked at this boy who had nothing, and was still offering her everything. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. You're a good person, Evan Carter, she whispered. I'm really not, Evan said quietly, but I'm trying. That night, Evan lay on the couch, under 2 thin blankets, staring at the ceiling and listening to the house creak in the cold. In his bedroom, Helen lay awake too, looking at the glow-in-the-dark stars some previous tenant had stuck to the ceiling. A child's room, once. She thought about Lucas, about the last time they'd really talked, not the surface conversations they had now, but real talking, the way they used to when he was young. She couldn't remember when it had stopped. She thought about Evan, sleeping on his own couch so she could have his bed, even though he was working himself to exhaustion, and his father was bleeding him dry. And she thought about the strange, painful, beautiful fact that sometimes strangers showed you more love than the people who were supposed to love you most. By Wednesday morning, Sandra Chen's video had been shared 473 times. By Wednesday afternoon, it had been viewed 53,000 times. By Wednesday evening, local news stations were calling Miller's Grocery for comment. By Thursday morning, the video had gone viral. Sandra wasn't an influencer. She wasn't anyone famous. She was a 36-year-old dental hygienist who posted pictures of her corgi and complained about the Kennedy Expressway. She had no idea how to handle what was happening. "Mom, you're on TV," her daughter had screamed Thursday morning, pointing at the television while eating cereal. And sure enough, there on WGN Morning News was Sandra's shaky video, playing on loop while the anchors talked about the Brookfield miracle and acts of kindness that restore your faith in humanity. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friend requests, messages from strangers, interview requests from podcasts and blogs and news outlets. The video had been picked up by national media. Good Morning America mentioned it. The Today Show played a clip. It showed up on Twitter, where it was retweeted by celebrities Sandra had never heard of. It exploded on TikTok, where Gen Z added their own commentary and trending sounds. The comments poured in by the hundreds of thousands. I'm literally sobbing. This is what we need more of in this world. The way that cashier just quietly helped her. That's a real hero. That old lady broke my heart. Faith in humanity restored. People started calling it the 85-cent movement. A few local businesses in Brookfield put up signs, "Pay it forward, we'll cover the difference." Coffee shops started doing suspended coffees. People could pay for an extra coffee that would be given to someone in need. Someone started a GoFundMe to find the elderly woman from the video and help her. Within 2 days it had raised $47,000. Someone else started a non-profit called 85 Cents of Kindness, dedicated to helping people who were just a little bit short on rent, utilities, groceries, medical bills. The movement grew. And at the center of it all was a grainy video of a tired-looking teenager at a grocery store register, quietly handing $1 to an old woman who was 85 cents short of buying soup. By Friday afternoon, the video had been viewed 12 million times. And that's when Lucas Whitmore saw it. Lucas Whitmore didn't spend much time on social media. He had people who handled that for him. An assistant who managed his LinkedIn. A publicist who dealt with the company's online presence. His personal accounts were ghost towns. But on Friday afternoon, his assistant Jennifer came into his office with her phone in her hand, and a strange expression on her face that Lucas couldn't quite read. "Lucas," she said, "I need you to watch something." Lucas was in the middle of reviewing an acquisition contract for a property in Naperville, $17 million, 300,000 square feet of mixed-use development. He didn't look up from the pages. "Can it wait? I'm trying to finish this before the 5 o'clock call." "No," Jennifer said, her voice uncharacteristically firm. "It really can't." Something in her tone made Lucas stop. He set down his pen and looked at her. "What is it?" She walked around his massive mahogany desk and held out her phone. "Just watch." The video was already playing when Lucas took the phone. He watched without sound at first. Just images of people in a small grocery store, smiling, laughing, passing items forward in line. It seemed nice, heartwarming in that vague social media way that he never paid attention to. Then the camera panned left, and Lucas saw her. His mother, standing at a register in her old wool coat, the one he'd tried to replace years ago, the one she'd refused to give up. Her white hair was messier than usual. Her face looked thin, tired. Lucas felt like someone had punched him in the chest. "Turn on the sound," he said, his voice strange and distant. Jennifer reached over and tapped the screen. Lucas heard the cashier's voice, young and polite. "That'll be $7.43. He heard the rustling of coins, of bills being smoothed out on a counter. He heard his mother's voice, shaking, barely audible. "I'm sorry, I thought I had enough. Can you take off the soup?" Lucas's hand tightened on the phone. He heard someone sigh behind her, impatient and cruel. And then he heard the cashier again. "It's okay, I got it." The video ended. Lucas sat frozen, staring at the black screen. "There's more," Jennifer said gently. She took the phone and pulled up the full Facebook thread on her computer, turning the screen so Lucas could see. 12 million views, 370,000 shares, comments, scrolling endlessly. "This made me ugly cry. That poor woman, you can see how hard it was for her to ask. The way her hands were shaking, my God, someone find her, and help her please." Lucas read the comments in silence, his face completely still. "When was this posted?" he finally asked. "Tuesday afternoon, 5 days ago." 5 days. His mother had been 85 cents short of buying groceries 5 days ago, and Lucas hadn't even known she'd left Brookfield Meadows. Where? Lucas had to stop and clear his throat. Where was this? Miller's Grocery in Brookfield. Lucas stood abruptly, his chair rolling backward. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked downtown Chicago. 32 floors below, the city moved like a machine, cars and people and life happening without him. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass. His mother, counting coins with shaking hands. His mother apologizing for being 85 cents short. His mother alone in some small grocery store, being sighed at by strangers while she tried to buy soup. How had it come to this? Lucas remembered being 8 years old, sitting at their tiny kitchen table while his mother made dinner. She'd been working 2 jobs then. Secretary work during the day, waitressing at night, and she was always tired, but she'd still come home and cook for him, help him with his homework, read him stories before bed. He remembered the year he'd wanted new sneakers, the expensive kind all the other kids had, and his mother had said they couldn't afford it. He'd been angry, the way kids get angry when they don't understand money. 2 weeks later, she'd given him the sneakers, brand new in a box. It wasn't until years later that he realized she'd worked extra shifts to buy them, that she'd probably skipped meals to make it work. He remembered her at his college graduation, crying with pride. At his first business deal, beaming from the back of the room. At every milestone, every achievement, she'd been there, radiating love and pride. When had he stopped seeing her? When had she become an obligation instead of a person? "Sir." Jennifer's voice was soft behind him. Lucas turned. His eyes were red, but his face was composed. "Call Brookfield Meadows. Find out when she left and why nobody informed me." "I already did," Jennifer said. "They said they called you 3 times on Tuesday evening and Wednesday. You were." "I was in meetings," Lucas finished, his voice hollow. "Of course I was." He pulled out his phone and checked his call log. There they were, 3 missed calls from Brookfield Meadows, 3 calls he'd ignored because he'd been too busy closing deals and making money and building his empire. While his mother was on the street, alone and hungry, Lucas closed his eyes. "Find her," he said. "I don't care what it takes. Find my mother." Jennifer worked fast. She called Brookfield Meadows first and got the full story. Helen had walked out Tuesday afternoon during a shift change. The staff had noticed within an hour. They'd filed a missing person report with Brookfield PD. They'd called Lucas 3 times. Then Jennifer called the police. No activity on Helen's credit cards. No sightings. No indication of where she might have gone. Then Jennifer did what made her worth the 6-figure salary Lucas paid her. She got creative. She called Miller's Grocery directly. Gloria answered, her voice warm. "Miller's Grocery, how can I help you?" "Hi, my name is Jennifer Park. I'm calling on behalf of Lucas Whitmore." We're trying to locate his mother, Helen Whitmore. We believe she was in your store earlier this week. She's in a video that's been circulating online." There was a pause. The woman from the video, the one Evan helped. "Yes, hold on." The phone went quiet for a moment. Then Gloria came back. "Evan's the one who helped her. He might know something. He's not working today, but I can give you his number." Jennifer called Evan's number. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. She tried again. No answer, so Jennifer pivoted. She called the Brookfield Police Department and asked if they had any security camera footage from the area around Miller's Grocery on Tuesday afternoon. They did, but they couldn't share it without proper authorization. Jennifer called Lucas. "I need you to call BPD and authorize them to share security footage with me." Lucas made the call. Within 30 minutes, Jennifer had access to the footage. She watched hours of grainy video. Helen leaving Miller's Grocery. Helen walking slowly down Maple Street. Helen sitting at a bus stop for a long time. Then, and this was the important part, a young man approaching her, talking to her, helping her stand, walking with her down a residential street. Jennifer followed their path on Google Maps Street View, cross-referencing with the timestamp. They'd gone to 3247 Oakwood Avenue. Jennifer pulled up property records. Renter Daniel Carter, current resident, Evan Carter, the same Evan who worked at Miller's Grocery. Jennifer called Lucas. "I found her." Lucas was in his car within 3 minutes. He drove himself, didn't call his driver, didn't wait for anyone, just got in his BMW and drove. The address Jennifer had given him was in a neighborhood he'd never been to, the kind of place people like him drove past without noticing. Small houses with chain-link fences, cars up on blocks in driveways, chain stores and check-cashing places on every corner. Lucas's chest felt tight the entire drive. He pulled up in front of 3247 Oakwood Avenue at 6:43 p.m. The house was small and run down, worse than he'd imagined. Peeling paint, a sagging gutter, weeds everywhere, no lights on inside, which seemed wrong for this time of evening. This was where his mother had been for 5 days. Lucas got out of his car and walked up to the door. His hands were shaking. He knocked. 3 sharp raps. Inside, Evan was heating soup on the stove. The power was still out, but he'd gotten paid that morning and had bought some supplies, more ramen, some canned soup, bread, eggs, basic stuff, but enough to keep them fed. Helen was sitting at the kitchen table, reading one of Evan's old paperbacks by lantern light. She'd been quieter today, more withdrawn, and Evan worried she was thinking about going back to Brookfield Meadows. When the knock came, they both froze. "Are you expecting someone?" Helen asked, her voice tight with sudden fear. "No." Evan turned off the stove and walked to the door, his heart pounding. He opened it. A man stood on the porch, mid-40s, tall, well-dressed in a way that screamed money. Dark wool coat that probably cost more than Evan's car, expensive watch, perfect haircut. His face was tight with barely controlled emotion. "Can I help you?" Evan asked, confused. The man looked past him into the dark house. "Is Helen Whitmore here?" Evan's stomach dropped. "Who's asking?" "I'm her son." Behind Evan, there was a sharp intake of breath. Helen appeared at his shoulder, her hand gripping his arm. "Lucas," her voice was barely a whisper. Lucas's carefully composed expression crumpled. "Mom." Helen stepped forward slowly, like she couldn't quite believe he was real. "What are you doing here? What am I?" Lucas's voice broke. He looked like he wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. "Mom, you've been missing for 5 days. 5 days. I've been looking everywhere. The police, private investigators, security footage." He stopped, pressing his hands to his face. "I thought something terrible had happened to you." "I wasn't missing," Helen said, her voice gaining strength. "I was here." Lucas lowered his hands and looked at Evan, really looked at him for the first time. Then he looked back at his mother. "With him? With a stranger? His name is Evan," Helen said, and there was steel in her voice now. "And he's been kinder to me than anyone has in a very long time." The words hit Lucas like a slap. He flinched visibly. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice raw. "Please, Mom. Just you and me."
Helen looked at Evan. He nodded slightly, giving her permission to go. "I'll be right back," she told him softly. Evan stepped aside and Helen walked out onto the porch with her son. The door closed behind them. Lucas and Helen stood in the cold, their breath making clouds in the air. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lucas said, "I saw the video." Helen closed her eyes. "The one from the grocery store," Lucas continued. His voice was shaking now, all the control gone. "I saw you counting change. I saw your hands shaking. I saw you ask to put the soup back because you were 85 cents short." He swallowed hard. 85 cents, Mom. You couldn't afford soup, and I've been closing million-dollar deals while you were. He couldn't finish. His face crumpled and suddenly he was crying, really crying, in a way Helen hadn't seen since he was a small boy. "Oh, Lucas," Helen whispered. "I'm so sorry." Lucas sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I thought putting you in that place was helping. I thought I was taking care of you. But I wasn't. I was putting you somewhere. I didn't have to think about you. Somewhere you'd be convenient. Lucas, you raised me by yourself. You worked 2 jobs. You went without so I could have more. You believed in me when no one else did." Lucas looked at her, his face wet with tears. "And this is how I repaid you. By putting you in a facility and visiting for 20 minutes every few weeks. By ignoring your calls. By not even noticing when you disappeared." Helen's own tears were falling now. "You were busy. I understood. That's not an excuse," Lucas said fiercely. "You're my mother. Nothing should be more important than you. Nothing." They stood there, both crying, years of distance and hurt flowing out between them. Finally, Helen reached out and took her son's hands. They were cold, shaking. "I don't blame you," she said gently. "You thought you were doing the right thing. And maybe I should have told you how unhappy I was. Maybe I should have said something instead of just leaving like that." "Why did you leave?" Lucas asked. "Why didn't you call me? I would have done anything." Helen looked at their joined hands. "Because I didn't want to be a burden. Because you're so busy, so successful, and I'm just an old woman who needs things. I didn't want to need you." "You're not a burden," Lucas said, his voice breaking again. "You're my mom. You'll never be a burden." Helen squeezed his hands. "I couldn't live like that anymore, Lucas. In that place it's beautiful, it's safe, it has everything. But I wasn't living. I was just existing, waiting. Someone else decided when I ate, what I ate. I couldn't cook. I couldn't go for walks alone. I couldn't make any choices for myself." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with tears. "I felt invisible." Lucas pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry. I'll fix this, I promise. Whatever you want, your own apartment, a house, whatever. I'll make it happen. Just please don't." His voice caught. "Please don't disappear again." Helen held on to her son and cried into his expensive coat, and for a moment, they were exactly what they used to be, a mother and her boy, finding their way back to each other. When they finally pulled apart, Lucas wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Who is he?" The kid inside. "His name is Evan Carter. He works at the grocery store where it happened." Helen's voice was soft. "He paid for my groceries when I was short. Then hours later he found me at a bus stop, eating cold soup because I had nowhere else to go, and he brought me here, fed me, gave me his bed, asked for nothing in return." Lucas stared at her. "Why would he do that?" "Because he has a good heart," Helen said simply. "Because he knows what it's like to struggle. His mother died 3 years ago. His father is an alcoholic who takes his money. He dropped out of college to work full-time, and he still barely has enough to survive." She looked back at the dark house. "And despite having nothing, he gave me everything." Lucas followed her gaze. The house suddenly looked different to him. Not run down, but brave. A place where people were trying their hardest and still falling short through no fault of their own. "I want to meet him," Lucas said. "Properly." They went back inside. Evan was standing in the kitchen, clearly trying to look like he hadn't been listening through the door. Lucas walked directly to him, and extended his hand. "Lucas Whitmore, thank you for taking care of my mother." Evan shook his hand, awkward under the weight of the moment. "I didn't really. She didn't need much. Just soup, and a warm place. That's more than most people would give," Lucas said. He looked around the dark house, noticing details, the disconnection notice on the counter, the camping lantern, the nearly empty cabinets, the cold air. How long has your power been out? Evan's face flushed. Just a couple days. It's fine. It's not fine, Lucas said, but his voice was gentle, not judgmental. None of this is fine. Evan's jaw tightened. I'm handling it. I know you are. Lucas's expression softened. My mother told me about your situation, about your father, about dropping out of school. I understand. More than you might think. Evan didn't know what to say to that. Lucas took a breath. I want to offer you something. A job. Evan blinked. A job. My mother needs someone, Lucas said, choosing his words carefully. Not a facility staff member. Not a nurse. She needs a companion. Someone who can be with her, help her live her life on her own terms. He looked at Evan directly. I think that person might be you. You want to hire me to what? Be her friend. I want to hire you to be her caregiver, Lucas clarified. You'd live with her, in whatever home she chooses. You'd help her with daily tasks, keep her company, make sure she's safe. In return I'll pay you $50,000 a year, plus full room and board. And if you want to go back to school, I'll cover your tuition, online classes, night classes, whatever works with the schedule. Evan felt like the floor had disappeared beneath him. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious, Lucas said. You were there when I wasn't. You saw my mother when I couldn't see her anymore. That's worth more to me than you can possibly imagine. Evan looked at Helen. She was smiling at him, tears in her eyes, nodding encouragement. $50,000, room and board, tuition. It was more money than Evan had ever imagined having. It was a future, a real future. Why? Evan asked, his voice rough. Why would you do this for me? Lucas's expression grew serious. Because you showed my mother kindness when she needed it most. Because you didn't walk past her at that bus stop. Because you brought her into your home even though you could barely afford to feed yourself. He paused. And because you remind me of someone I used to be, before I forgot what mattered. Evan looked at Helen again. She reached out and took his hand. Say yes, she said softly. Please, I want you with me. And really, when she put it like that, what else could he say? Okay, Evan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Yeah, okay. Lucas extended his hand again, and they shook. Welcome aboard, Evan. Evan nodded, unable to trust his voice. Lucas pulled out his phone. I'm going to make a few calls. Get your power turned back on tonight, at minimum. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest. Finding my mother a home, getting you set up, all of it. You don't have to. Yes, I do, Lucas said firmly. You took care of my mother. Now let me take care of you. Within 2 hours the power was back on at 3247 Oakwood Avenue. Lucas had made a single phone call. Apparently he knew someone who knew someone at ComD. And suddenly the disconnection was resolved, the back payments cleared, everything handled. When the lights flickered on, Helen actually gasped. Oh my, she said, looking around the kitchen as if seeing it for the first time. Then she started to cry. Evan didn't cry, but it was close. He'd been living in the dark for a week, rationing candles, wearing 2 jackets inside. And now, just like that, it was warm again, light again. Lucas ordered dinner from a nice Italian place in downtown Brookfield. When it arrived, veal parmesan, pasta carbonara, salad, bread, tiramisu. It filled the small kitchen with the kind of smells Evan had forgotten existed. They ate together at the small table, the 3 of them crowded around, and it felt surreal. A tycoon, a retired teacher and a grocery store clerk, eating expensive Italian food in a house that had been dark an hour ago. This is good, Evan said, because he didn't know what else to say. Helen was eating slowly, savoring every bite. I haven't had tiramisu in 15 years, she murmured. Lucas watched her with an expression Evan couldn't quite read. Regret maybe, or something deeper. After dinner, Lucas said, I'm putting you both in a hotel tonight, somewhere warm and comfortable. Tomorrow we'll start looking at places for you, Mom. What do you want? An apartment? A house? A house, Helen said immediately. With a kitchen, a real kitchen where I can cook. Done, Lucas said. What else? A garden, even just a small one. Done. And a porch. I want to sit on a porch and watch the world go by. Lucas smiled, and it transformed his face. Consider it done. Helen looked at Evan. And Evan needs a proper bedroom, with a desk for studying. Mom, Evan started, embarrassed. It's not negotiable, Helen said firmly. Then she looked at Lucas. And I want to be near here, near Brookfield. This is where I feel at home. Lucas nodded. We'll find something perfect. I promise. That night they stayed at a hotel near O'Hare, the Hyatt Regency, where Lucas had booked a 2-bedroom suite. Helen got 1 bedroom, Evan the other. Lucas said he'd stay in a separate room down the hall. Evan stood in his hotel room and stared at the king-sized bed, the flat-screen TV, the bathroom with heated floors. He'd never stayed anywhere like this in his life. He took a shower, a real shower, long and hot, and then lay on the bed in the white terry cloth robe the hotel provided. The mattress was so soft he felt like he was floating. Evan stared at the ceiling and tried to process what had happened in the last 6 hours. His life had changed, completely changed. He pulled out his phone and looked at the texts from his father. There were 11 of them, increasingly desperate. Dad, where are you, Dad? Evan, answer me, Dad. I need money. Man, come on, Dad. Please, Dad. I'm sorry, Dad. I'll do better. I swear. Evan stared at the texts for a long time. Then he typed, we need to talk. Tomorrow, sober. He hit send and turned off his phone. 3 doors down, Lucas sat in his own room with a glass of scotch he wasn't drinking. He'd called Jennifer and told her to clear his calendar for the next 2 weeks. 2 weeks, Jennifer had repeated, shocked. Lucas, you have the Denver meeting, the Tokyo investors, the cancel everything. Lucas said, or postpone it. I don't care. I'm taking time off. He'd never taken time off. Not real time off. Not in 20 years, but he was taking it now. In her room, Helen sat by the window in her nightgown and looked out at the city lights. She'd lived in Chicago her whole life, but she'd never seen it from this angle. High up, glittering beautiful. She thought about Lucas, about the way he'd cried on her porch, about the way he'd looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time in years. She thought about Evan, about the kindness in his eyes, about the way he'd brought her home when he had nothing. And she thought about second chances, about how sometimes you have to lose everything to find what you were looking for all along. Helen pressed her hand to the cold glass and smiled. 3 weeks later, Evan moved into the house Lucas had found for Helen. It was perfect, a modest 2-story in Oak Park, just across the border from Brookfield. Cream-colored siding, a front porch with a swing, a backyard with raised garden beds. The kitchen had granite countertops, and a window over the sink that let in morning light. There were 3 bedrooms, one for Helen, one for Evan, and one that Lucas said could be a guest room, or an office, Helen had suggested. For when you're studying, the house felt like a home in a way Evan had never experienced. It felt safe. Helen cried when she first walked in. Then she'd gone straight to the kitchen and started making tea, humming softly to herself. Evan's room was on the 2nd floor, with a view of the oak trees lining the street. Lucas had furnished it with a proper bed, a desk, a bookshelf, everything Evan could need. It was the nicest room Evan had ever had. He stood in the doorway, looking at it, and felt something tight in his chest loosen for the first time in years. Evan settled into a routine quickly. He drove Helen to the library twice a week, where she'd started volunteering again, reading to children during story hour, helping with book clubs. He cooked with her, learning her recipes. They watched old movies together in the evenings. They talked. Lucas visited every Sunday for dinner. At first, the meals were awkward, too much silence, too many unspoken things. But slowly, something shifted. Lucas started putting his phone away. He started asking his mother about her week instead of just talking about his. He started staying longer. Helen bloomed under the attention. Her cheeks got color again. She laughed more. She planted herbs in the garden, basil, rosemary, thyme, and clipped them fresh for dinner. Evan watched them rebuild their relationship piece by piece, and felt something like hope. Everything was good. Everything was finally good. And then on a Tuesday afternoon in early February, Daniel Carter showed up. Evan was in the kitchen making lunch, grilled cheese and tomato soup. Helen's request when the doorbell rang. I'll get it, Helen called from the living room. Evan heard the door open, heard Helen's polite greeting. Hello, can I help you? Then he heard a man's voice, slurred and loud. Where's my son? Evan's blood went cold. He turned off the stove and walked quickly to the front door. His father stood on the porch, swaying slightly. Daniel looked worse than Evan had ever seen him. Thinner, unshaven, his clothes dirty and rumpled.
His eyes were bloodshot and unfocused. "Dad," Evan said, stepping in front of Helen. "What are you doing here? So this is where you've been hiding." Daniel's words ran together. "Living in a fancy house while your old man's suffering. You need to go," Evan said quietly. "You're drunk." "I'm not drunk," Daniel said, but even he didn't sound convinced. I need some help, Evan. I'm in trouble, real trouble this time." "How did you find me?" "Wasn't hard. Whole neighborhood's talking about you. Daniel Carter's kid hit the jackpot. Living with some rich people now." Daniel gestured wildly at the house. "Look at this place. You got money now, so give me some." "I don't have money," Evan said. "This isn't my house. I work here." "Don't lie to me," Daniel snarled. He took a step forward, and Evan instinctively moved back, keeping himself between his father and Helen. "You're living like a king and you won't help your own father. I've been helping you for 3 years. The words burst out of Evan, before he could stop them. "I gave you everything I had. I paid your bills. I covered your rent. I gave up school for you, and you just kept drinking." Daniel's face crumpled. I know and I'm sorry, but I can't stop, Evan. I can't." His voice broke. "I'm drowning. I owe people money, bad people. They're gonna hurt me if I don't pay." "How much?" Evan asked, even though he knew he shouldn't. $3,000. Evan closed his eyes. "I don't have $3,000. But he does," Daniel said, his eyes darting past Evan to look into the house. "The rich guy, your boss, he could give me that much, and not even notice." "No," Evan said firmly. "Evan, please, no." Evan's voice was loud now, sharp. Neighbors were starting to appear on their porches, watching. "I'm not doing this anymore, Dad. You need help, real help, not money." Daniel's expression darkened, that familiar shift from desperate to angry that Evan knew too well. "You think you're better than me now, living in this nice house, working for these rich people. You've forgotten where you came from." "I haven't forgotten anything," Evan said, his voice shaking. "I remember Mom. I remember how she worked herself to death, taking care of us. I remember her funeral, and how you were too drunk to give her eulogy. I remember every promise you made and broke. I remember all of it." Daniel flinched like he'd been hit. "You need to leave," Evan said. "Now, Evan. Get out." Daniel took a stumbling step backward. His face was wet with tears now, all the anger drained out of him. "I loved her too," he whispered. "I loved her so much I didn't know how to keep living without her." And that broke something in Evan. "I know," Evan said, and now he was crying too. "I know you did, but she's gone, Dad. And I can't keep drowning with you." Daniel sank to his knees on the front lawn. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to be better." Evan stood on the porch, frozen, tears streaming down his face. Part of him wanted to run to his father. Part of him wanted to never see him again. He didn't know what to do. Then Helen appeared at his side. She put a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Stay here," she said softly. She walked down the porch steps slowly and approached Daniel. Evan watched, his heart in his throat, as this 74-year-old woman knelt in the grass beside his drunk father. "Mr. Carter," Helen said gently. "Look at me." Daniel raised his head. His eyes were red, desperate, lost. "When was the last time you ate?" Helen asked. Daniel blinked, confused by the question. I don't know." "Come inside," Helen said. "Let's get some food in you, then we can figure this out." "I can't," Daniel whispered. I'm a mess." "We're all a mess sometimes," Helen said. She extended her hand. "Come on." Daniel stared at her hand for a long moment, then slowly he took it. Helen helped him stand, and together they walked up the porch steps. Evan watched them pass, unable to move, unable to speak. Inside, Helen sat Daniel at the kitchen table. Evan followed, numb, and watched as she heated up the soup he'd been making and put together a sandwich. She set it in front of Daniel with a glass of water. "Eat," she said gently. "Then we'll talk." Daniel ate slowly, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the spoon. Nobody spoke. Just as Daniel was finishing, the front door opened. Lucas's voice called out, "Mom, Evan, everything okay?" "Your neighbor Mrs. Patterson called me, said there was." He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. The drunk man at the table, Evan standing against the wall, his face blotchy with tears, Helen sitting calmly beside the stranger. "What's going on?"
Lucas asked, his voice careful. This is Evan's father, Helen said. Daniel Carter. Lucas's expression shifted through several emotions: surprise, understanding, concern. He set down his briefcase and walked into the kitchen slowly. Mr. Carter, he said. Daniel looked up at him with bloodshot eyes. You're the rich guy. I'm Lucas Whitmore. He pulled out a chair and sat down. What's going on? And somehow in that kitchen, with Helen's gentle presence and Lucas's steady calm, Daniel talked. He talked about Evan's mother, about how her death had broken something inside him he didn't know how to fix. He talked about the drinking, about losing his job, about watching his son sacrifice everything to keep them afloat. He talked about the debt, about the people he owed money to, about being so desperate he'd come here to beg. He talked about feeling like he'd lost himself, and not knowing how to find his way back. Lucas listened to all of it without interrupting. When Daniel finished, exhausted and hollow, Lucas leaned forward. Mr. Carter, he said, your son cares about you very much, but you're killing him. You know that, right? Daniel nodded, fresh tears falling. You need help, Lucas continued. Professional help, rehab, 30 days minimum, inpatient with real support afterward. I can't afford, I'll pay for it, Lucas said simply. The room went very quiet. Daniel stared at him. Why would you do that? Lucas glanced at Evan, then at his mother. Because someone once showed my mother kindness when she had nothing and nowhere to go. Someone saw her as a person worth helping, even though he barely had enough to help himself. He looked back at Daniel. I'm just paying that forward. Daniel looked at Evan. You really want me to go? Evan's throat was tight. Yeah, Dad. I do, because I can't watch you die anymore. Okay, Daniel whispered. Okay. Daniel Carter entered Serenity Hills Recovery Center the following Monday. Lucas arranged everything: the facility, the transportation, the 30-day inpatient program followed by intensive outpatient therapy and sober living placement. The cost was $48,000. Lucas wrote the check without blinking. Evan visited his father during family therapy sessions, which happened twice in the 30 days. The visits were hard, confronting years of hurt and resentment and disappointment, but they were also necessary. I blamed you for needing help, Evan admitted during the second session, his voice breaking. After Mom died, I wanted you to be strong for both of us, and when you weren't, I hated you for it. I should have been stronger, Daniel said. You were just a kid. You shouldn't have had to take care of me. But I was also glad you needed me, Evan continued, because it gave me a purpose, something to focus on besides missing her. He wiped his eyes. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, Daniel said, his own face wet. You have nothing to apologize for. I'm the one who failed you. The therapist, a woman named Dr. Chen, spoke up gently. Grief makes us all do things we're not proud of. The question is, what are you both willing to do differently going forward? When Daniel completed the 30-day program, Lucas made another offer. I need someone to help maintain my properties, he said. They were sitting in the garden behind Helen's house. Daniel looking healthier than he had in years, color back in his face, clarity in his eyes, fixing things, doing repairs, general maintenance. It's honest work. $40,000 a year to start, with benefits. Interested? Daniel looked at Lucas for a long moment. Why are you doing all this for me? Because everyone deserves a second chance, Lucas said simply, and because Evan deserves to see his father healthy and whole. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve this. Maybe not, Lucas said, but Evan does. So do the work. Stay sober. Be the father he needed you to be 3 years ago. Daniel nodded, unable to speak. Slowly, carefully, Daniel rebuilt his life. He moved into a sober living house in Brookfield, a structured environment with rules, accountability, other men in recovery. He went to AA meetings 5 times a week. He worked for Lucas's company, doing repairs and maintenance, using the skills he'd thought he'd lost. It wasn't perfect. There were hard days, days when Daniel wanted to drink so badly he could taste it. Days when he called his sponsor at 2 in the morning, shaking, barely holding on. But he held on. 3 months after entering recovery, Daniel showed up to Sunday dinner at Helen's house. Evan opened the door to find his father standing there, clean-shaven, wearing clothes that fit, holding a small bouquet of flowers. These are for Helen, Daniel said nervously. For everything she's done. Evan felt his throat tighten. Come in, Dad. They ate together that night. Evan, Daniel, Helen and Lucas. and it felt like something precious and fragile and new. Daniel told stories about Evan as a kid, about the time he tried to fix a bike and ended up making it worse, about his first day of kindergarten. Helen laughed. Lucas smiled. Evan sat there feeling like maybe, just maybe, things could actually be okay. After dinner, Evan and Daniel walked in the backyard, while Helen and Lucas cleaned up. "I'm proud of you," Evan said, "for doing the work." Daniel's eyes were bright. "I'm trying. Every day I'm trying. That's all I ever wanted," Evan said. They stood in the cold February evening, father and son, and for the first time in 3 years, they felt like family again. Meanwhile, the story of Miller's Grocery continued to ripple outward. The 85 Cents of Kindness non-profit had grown exponentially. They'd helped over 1,000 families with small grants, rent payments, utility bills, medical expenses, groceries, all because of an 85-cent deficit and one teenager's simple kindness. Schools across Illinois started teaching about the Brookfield miracle as an example of how small actions can create massive change. Gloria at Miller's Grocery had to hire 2 more cashiers to handle the increased traffic. People came from all over just to shop there, to be part of the story. Sandra Chen's video had been viewed 42 million times, and Evan, the quiet, tired boy at the center of it all, was enrolled in online classes at DePaul University, studying social work, still living with Helen, still helping her plant her garden, and read her books and live her life with dignity. 1 year after Helen Whitmore walked into Miller's Grocery and found herself 85 cents short, 4 people gathered in her dining room. It was Sunday. Lucas had brought wine. Evan had made lasagna with Helen's help, her recipe passed down from her own mother. Daniel had spent the afternoon fixing the loose hinge on the garden gate. They ate slowly, talking and laughing. Daniel told a story about a ridiculous repair job. Lucas talked about finally taking that vacation he'd been putting off for a decade. He was going to Italy with his mother in the spring. Evan mentioned his psychology midterm, which he'd aced. Helen just smiled and listened, her eyes moving from face to face, soaking in every moment. After dinner they moved to the living room. Helen put on a record, Ella Fitzgerald, and they sat in comfortable silence, drinking coffee, watching the evening light fade through the windows. "You know," Helen said eventually, "I've been thinking about that day, the day at the grocery store." Everyone turned to look at her. "I was so ashamed," Helen continued softly, "standing there with my little pile of coins, not enough to buy what I needed. I felt invisible, like I didn't matter anymore." She looked at Evan. "And then you saw me, really saw me, and you gave me $1. "It was nothing," Evan said automatically. "No," Helen said firmly, "it was everything, because it wasn't about the money. It was about being seen, about mattering." She reached over and took his hand. "You changed my life that day." Lucas spoke up, his voice rough. "You changed mine too. That video, seeing my mother like that, it broke something open in me. I'd been so focused on success, on building my company, on being busy, I'd forgotten what mattered." He looked at his mother. "I'd forgotten you." "You didn't forget me," Helen said gently. "You just lost sight of me for a while. We found our way back." Daniel cleared his throat. Everyone looked at him. He looked uncomfortable with the attention, but he spoke anyway. "I don't have fancy words," he said. "But Evan, you could have given up on me. You should have given up on me. I gave you every reason to." He swallowed hard. "But you didn't. And when I finally hit bottom, there were people here to catch me." He nodded at Lucas and Helen, "People who didn't even know me but helped anyway. I don't know why, but I'm grateful. We helped because Evan helped my mother," Lucas said simply. "That's how it works. One person cares, then another, and suddenly everything changes." Evan sat there listening to them, feeling overwhelmed. I just gave her $1, he said, his voice small. "I didn't do anything special." "You did the most special thing," Helen said. "You saw someone who needed help, and you helped. No questions asked, no judgment, just kindness." She squeezed his hand. "Do you know how rare that is?" Evan thought about the woman he'd met a year ago, counting change with trembling hands. He thought about finding her at that bus stop, eating cold soup in the freezing cold. He thought about the choice he'd made, not a big choice, not a heroic choice, just the choice to care. "I think about my mom a lot," Evan said quietly, "about how she would have wanted someone to help her if she needed it. I guess I tried to do for you what I wish someone had done for her."
Helen's eyes filled with tears. She'd be so proud of you. Yeah, Evan said, his voice breaking. I hope so. They sat like that for a while, these four people whose lives had intersected in the most unexpected way. A grocery store clerk, and a teacher, and a tycoon, and a recovering alcoholic, bound together by 85 cents and a choice to care. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, soft fat flakes that caught the streetlight and glowed like tiny stars. Helen stood and walked to the window, watching it come down. It's beautiful, she whispered. Evan joined her at the window, then Lucas, then Daniel. They stood together watching the snow blanket the street, the trees, the world. You know what I learned this year, Lucas said, that the things we think don't matter. $1, 20 minutes, a conversation, a meal, those are the things that matter most. That's what they mean when they say love is in the details, Helen said. It's not the grand gestures, it's the small things, done with intention, with care. Daniel spoke up. It's also about second chances, third chances, fourth chances, in my case. He looked at Evan. Thank you for not giving up on me. Evan leaned against his father's shoulder. Thank you for not giving up on yourself. That night, after Daniel and Lucas had gone home, Evan helped Helen clean up the kitchen. They worked in comfortable silence, washing dishes, putting away leftovers, wiping down counters. Are you happy? Helen asked suddenly. Evan thought about it. He thought about his classes at DePaul, about the career he was building in social work. He thought about this house, about having a safe place to sleep, and enough food to eat. He thought about his father, sober and healthy and trying. He thought about Helen, who'd become like a grandmother to him, who read him poetry and taught him to cook, and listened to his fears without judgment. Yeah, Evan said, surprised by how true it was. I think I actually am. Helen smiled and pulled him into a hug. Good, you deserve to be happy. They stood there in the kitchen, in this house that had become a home, and Evan understood something profound. Kindness wasn't about changing the world. It was about seeing one person and deciding they mattered. It was about giving when you had almost nothing because you remembered what it felt like to have less than that. It was about 85 cents and a can of soup, and the choice to care when it would have been easier not to. It was about second chances. It was about home. Later, Evan lay in his bed, his real bed, in his real room, in a house that was warm and safe, and looked at the photo on his nightstand. It was new, taken just last month, him and Helen and Lucas and Daniel, all smiling at Sunday dinner. They looked like a family. They were a family. Evan turned off the light, and closed his eyes, and for the first time in 3 years, he slept without nightmares. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white, making everything new again.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.